Anyone got a pencil? Hello, my name's Mark and I'm the host of the Mixtape podcast, where every week on the show I will ask my guests to make up an imaginary mixtape. They'll give it a title and pick 6 tracks. Track 1, what's going to be your intro track, your attention grabber, your track 1 side one that's going to draw me in and make me want to listen to the rest of your tape. Track 2, pick a song that you sing loud and proud when you're on your own in the car or the shower. Track 3, pick your favourite cover version. Track 4, pick a song you wish you could have played to your 18-year-old self. Track 5, pick a song that you would put on your mixtape to let the listener know that you are romantically interested. And track 6, I'm going to ask them to pick something a little bit obscure, maybe a B-side or an album track. Don't forget to smash that follow or plus sign at the top of the page and you'll be notified every time there's a new episode. And you can follow me on Instagram at the Mixtape Perth. Hope you enjoy this week's chat. Hello and welcome to this week's Mixtape show. And on this week's show, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by reggae royalty, Mr. Al Anderson. How are you, mate?
I am very well, sir. And I gratefully appreciate your time and your interest.
Likewise, mate. Likewise. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. So the original Wailers bringing the hits of Bob Marley and the Wailers to Australia. I'll just go through the tour dates real quick. So November the 16th, it's the Triffid in Brisbane. November the 17th, the Manning Bar in Sydney. And November the 18th, the Rosemount Hotel in Perth. And 23rd, the Gov in Adelaide, and the 24th, 170 Russell in Melbourne. Now, the Sydney and Perth dates have already sold out, so you are unlucky there. But if you want to get along to moshtix.com.au for the remaining tickets for those dates, then that is your place to go for tickets. Now, Al, has it been a while since you've been to Australia? Is this your first time? When were you in Australia last, mate?
Oh, gosh. We go every year. New Zealand, Australia is God's country. We love this area of the world. They've embraced us from the early 70s when Bob was touring when we were touring with Bob.
Yeah.
Massive audiences. They crashed the fence. Like thousands of people. One of our more popular areas. In fact, I blame New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand for being the key element to bring us to the rest of the world, because they embraced us really early in the game and made it really popular for the rest of the world to understand reggae music and Bob Marley and the Wailers music. Thumbs up on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, no problem at all. I noticed on your schedule there, you got a few days break like in between. Are you going to be getting out and doing some sightseeing while you're in Australia? How do you like to go when you're on tour, mate?
I'll do some training, a little light jogging, and get to some nice seafood markets, see some of the country, go to some nightclubs, and listen to some talent, and just stay active while I'm there. Just move around.
Yeah, fantastic. Some bands I've spoken to, like they come to Australia. It's a long way to come for some bands, and they're just like lurking around in their hotel room and doing sound check and then going to the show and then coming back to the hotel and not really seeing much of, like you say, God's country where we are right now. So yeah, absolutely love to hear you getting out and about, mate.
Especially with the mom and pop guitar stores and the vintage guitar stores.
Mm-hmm.
I really that to be the major part of my day off, is looking for, because Australia have a lot of British influence with sending from England to Australia. So you can pretty interesting British old pedals and amps, and you got a lot of good pedal makers, because the older guy now that made the Hot Cake, which was an overdrive pedal, which was really popular. I was able to literally go to his house and get one from him. I called him and he said, "Yeah, I'll put one together for you." So musical instruments, and just trying to keep it healthy. Good food, and got some really good wine. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm in.
seafood and wine. That's seafood and wine. That's what we do best, mate, in Australia for sure, for sure. Tell us a little bit. Let's go back, Al, if you wouldn't mind, and tell us a little bit, sort of how you came to be playing in Bob Marley's band. And I think you were working with Island Records, is that right? And Traffic when you sort of first started working with Bob.
No, it started with Richard Branson at Virgin.
Oh, okay.
And I had met Chris Blackwell in Boston and New York when he was touring with Free and Traffic.
Mm.
And
Oh,
I
okay.
met all the in Free. But when I got to England, the first job that I really had, like I was working at a bakery, at Dorothy Muriel's Bakery in the early 70s in Boston. And I befriended, Brad, Joe, Stephen, and Tom. And so I was selling guitars. I would find vintage guitars throughout the tri-state of New York,
Mhm.
and I would bring them to Boston. And I was also working at a bakery. So I had little time to go to New York and go all over Syracuse. Joe Bassamana's father, Lem Bassamana, had a great store in Syracuse where he would sell me some really great pieces. I'd go up there and grab 3 or 4 pieces, bring them to Boston. Aerosmith would buy them. And I got to just buy, sell, trade guitars with a lot of stores up in Boston because I was sneaking into the Berklee School of Music. I sneak into these seminars and get free education. So Boston was a really good spot, but they also had some really fabulous nightclubs. Boston Tea Party, and just a whole bunch of clubs where Santana, Traffic, Free, Fleetwood, they would all come through town. So I would be there ready to sell anybody a guitar. And I got to meet Aerosmith was one of the more popular groups in the earlier days. And then it went on to, I met Steve Winwood, Jim Capaldi, and became really good friends. Maynard Ferguson. I knew all the guys in his band. And everybody said, oh man, you need to come over to England. There's plenty of work over here for a guy like you. You like by selling trade guitars, you can play. And so as soon as I financially was stable, I took Chris Wood was the flute player and saxophonist. And I became really good friends with Paul Kossoff,
Mm-hmm.
who really got to Bob Marley. And I'll get to that in 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
But it was basically initially getting from Boston to England, got to England, and I didn't have a job. And I was kind of like busking for a weekly hotel to stay in. And I found a job that I could do some recording with Delroy Washington, who was a Virgin, a Richard Branson production. I was able to work with him, and the album became a one song, Freedom Fighters, which I'm not on. I'm on the rest of the tracks. That was the great guitarist named Pat Thrall. But one of the songs became like a #1 hit. The background band, along with myself, was Oswald. So I played with Oswald, was the initial first kind of like record, come to England, come to London, get a gig, and get a job. So it started at Virgin with Richard. And then I heard, I had met Chris Blackwell before I met Richard, but I didn't work for Island Records at that time. It was Virgin. And Chris had really cool parties where guys like Jimmy Cliff would be there, Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs. So he had the jerk chicken and the plantains and rice and peas and a lot of Mary Jane smoking going on over the island. So I went to one of his parties and I got to reunite with Chris, Paul Kossoff, and the island group of bands that he was promoting and distributing. So it was Traffic and Free. And one of my favorite groups, Roxy Music, was there. And for all the reasons in the world, I just started to go over to Island and hang out. And then I met John Martin, and he was an acoustic songwriter. And Steve Winwood was producing him. And I left Virgin because Oswald and Delroy Washington kind of separated. So there was no work at Virgin for me at the moment. So I was just sitting there waiting for something to happen. So I went over to Island because Island had the big party scene over there. You got Roxy Music, Nico, Eno, Bob Marley was there, which I wasn't familiar with Bob Marley and the Wailers music at that time. And the person that introduced me to Bob Marley's music was basically Paul Kossoff, the lead guitar player from Free. I used to go to Paul's house. He had I was a guitar collector. He was a guitar collector. We met in New York and became friends. Got to England, got to reunite with him and Traffic because they used to tour with Traffic at that time. And he became like a good friend. I'd go over his house. We'd take down a few pints, have a few joints, and just talk music and practice and play. And he was always writing songs, and he was an interesting character, Paul Kossoff. And one night I was at his house, and he had all these old, very expensive late 50s Les Pauls, which I loved. I had a couple myself. And so he got a telephone call from Chris Blackwell saying, "Oh, Bob Marley's in town, and I want you to come and put some overdubs on some album I'm going to release for Bob." And at that time, his health wasn't really good, and he'd been hitting the jar really hard. And so he said, "Look, I'm with a young American kid. He's a friend of mine. I'll send him over." And he said, "Well, what's his name?" His name is Al. He says, "Well, I think I know that guy. We're going to send a minicab for him." So they sent the minicab for me, picked me up at Paul Kossoff's house. The guitars were free. And I went to Basing Street Studios in Island Records, and there was Chris Blackwell, Bob Marley. I walked into the studio. I briefly said hello to them, straight into the studio with my guitar, plugged in, and said, "What do you want me to do?" And so they played the music from the Natty Dread album. And I was like, wow, this sounds really cool, because just before I came to the studio to do the Natty Dread overdubs, Paul Kossoff played Catch a Fire and Burning. So he said, "This is what these guys sound like. Have you ever heard their music?" I says, "I don't know of Bob Marley. I knew of Alton Ellis, and Dennis Brown was a big star. But Bob Marley and the Wailers had a couple of records out, like Scratch did Soul Rebels, and then they did Catch a Fire and Burning." So he played some songs from Catch a Fire and Burning where I could like calibrate what I was going to hear. But when I got to the studio for the Natty Dread sessions, that wasn't the rebel music they were playing. Bob had more love songs and his rebel music as well. So they kind of played like No Woman, No Cry, So Jase, then Bellyful, Roadblock. And I was like, wow, I can relate to this. And I know pretty much what to do. So I said, "Run the tape, let's do this." And so they started with like So Jase or No Woman, No Cry, like that. And I think I was playing a little bit too much. I wanted to kind of impress them. So on the first initial, I know No Woman, No Cry, Bob didn't like it. I was playing a little bit too much. And then he says, no, man, I want to hear the blues. And I said, okay, well, I think No Woman, No Cry is more of a country song to me, like a Nashville thing. And so I know just what to do. So we ran the tape back again, and I played it a lot slower and a lot more comprehensively. And they loved it. They were shouting in the control room, "Oh, that's it. That's the landing point. And that's the takeoff this is where we want you to take off and land with these recordings." So then they went on to So Jase and Bellyful, and I was playing a little bit hard rock, and Bob was like, no, man, I want to hear, that's not what I want to hear. Everyone else is doing that. So then I just said I said inside myself, I said, okay, I need to come up with something to fit what I'm hearing from him. And then it was like, okay, I feel it. So we just ran the reel. I said, the best thing to do is, I didn't really get a chance to listen to the music. I know where the chords were going because it was like a 1-4-5 progression with some minor. Bob likes major and minor. So I was able to adapt to the chord structure because it wasn't that difficult. I wanted to be where the vocals were and where the chorus and the refrain say something in these spots that would augment his first, the intro to his verse. Like there's the verse, the intro, play something in the intro, then there's the verse, don't play anything, be kind of silent, and then come in where there's a gap going into the chorus. So I had to divide where I could play, where I couldn't play, because he didn't want me to play straight through the music and just dig in with a whole bunch of distortion and effects and stuff. He wanted a raw, natural sound. And I realized that earlier in the game with that particular album. So I gave him exactly what he kind of wanted to hear and please myself too. And so I just said, the best thing is just run the tape, let me hear what you have, and I'll fill in everywhere. So there was So Just Say, Them Belly Full, No Woman No Cry, and Talking Blues and all that. I played acoustic guitar on and electric guitar, and I just let them run the tape. And I think I completed like 5-6 songs on that album on but like 45 minutes, not even an hour. So they said, oh, I think enough. Come in and listen to it. And so we went in, we listened to everything from the beginning to the end of maybe an hour worth of recording altogether. And they were really quiet. And then when everything was over, Bob and Chris looked at each other and said, that's it. That's exactly it. That's it. And so I was like, wow, okay. And so I kind of left the studio and didn't get a chance to talk to Chris or Bob. They were just elated that they had completed the overdubs for the guitar parts of the Natty Dread album. And then like maybe about a week later, Chris got in touch with me through Paul. I was at Paul's house again, playing guitar with him. And Chris called Paul and said, hey, can you get in touch with Al? He didn't leave a telephone number, and he just like mysteriously left. Because, you know, after I did the session, I didn't know Bob and I didn't really know Chris. I knew that they were well pleased about completing the guitar track. So left, they called me back, had a meeting with Bob and him. And Bob said, would you come and live with me in Jamaica and play lead guitar for me in the Bob Marley and the Wailers new group? Because he had just left Peter and Bunny. And that was pretty much the start for me, was the Natty Dread album in that order.
Yeah. And you went on to become very sort of close with Bob, and especially in the late year of his career. And talk to us a little bit about how close you were with Bob and how he kind of, you know, wanted you to continue the work of the Wailers after his passing.
The ironic thing was that he said, would you come with me to Jamaica next week? And I was like, wow, I just had my son Justin was just born, and Justin lived in Newcastle and Chilton. So I didn't really want to leave England. I wanted to stay with my son as long as I could. But they decided to give me a percentage and a lot of other things like room and board and transportation. So it sounded like a better deal than I had in London. And it would be better for me to go maybe to Jamaica and work in Jamaica and send the money back to England, you know, because they were going to give me a British deal. So I would be getting pounds that would be good for my family. So that I could help my son by having a job, because I didn't have a steady job then. So I took the offer, but Bob took me from England to Delaware, his mother's house. And I slept on a sofa for maybe 4 or 5 months before I reached. So I stayed with his mother in Delaware, and his two brothers, Richard and Anthony. and Pearl, his sister, his half sister. And Miss Booker would feed me, and me and Bob would just sit after he had a job at that time. So when he came home, we would just sit and play till early morning. He'd get a few hours sleep in, and then he would go to work and then come back, and he'd be with his family, his mother, his half brother, sisters, and myself. And so I did that, and I was like, when are we going to go to Jamaica? And he says, it's not the right time for me to go to Jamaica, and we're going to be here for a while. So I got to know his mother, his whole family. I got to know him because we played every day, but there was a separation of it, like 8 hours a day. And when he came home, there was enough time to sit in and play some music, me to get used to him as a songwriter and as a person. And so we got close, his mother was there, his family, they were feeding me. I didn't care about the conditions. It was kind of like a ragamuffin thing, and I went along with it. But then he said, now it's time to go to Jamaica because we're packaging the album. We need some promo and some pictures and stuff. And I believe we did a video before we left with Family and Carly and him for Lively Up Yourself. That was another song from the Natty Dread album I had a lot of fun with, and was really easy to do because if you know that song, you know that it's a really bouncy, cool track for anybody to play. And so he said, it's ready now. We'll do the video. We did the video. And then we ended up back at his mother's house. And then from his mother's house in Delaware to Jamaica. And I went straight from Delaware to his cousin Sledger Booker, his mother's family. Bob immediately left with Chris to go to Brazil for a publishing deal. So I was in Kingston 12 in a gully with my guitar and my suitcase. Mm-hmm. I was like, what the fuck? Mm-hmm. Where's Bob? Oh, he won't be back till a couple of weeks. He's in Brazil doing a deal. And I said, well, I don't have a hotel. I don't have anywhere to live. And so I lived with Sledger for 2 weeks. And then Bob came back to Kingston from Brazil with Chris Blackwell. They got the distribution deal out there or some publishing, something like this. And I went straight from the gully in Kingston 12 to Hope Road. But before I got to Hope Road, he took me out to Bull Bay, where Rita had just given birth to Stephen. Stephen was like a young, and Ziggy and Sedella were at their house there. But there was no room for me. So when he picked me up at the airport, we drove around to all these hotels. And I really think that Bob wasn't financially secure to take on like somebody to pay for their rent them a car, feed them every day. So when I got to Bull Bay before Hope Road, it was like, you're on your own. I was like, holy shit.
Wow.
I don't know what he's saying, because they speak in Patois. I was like, wow, this is really difficult. So the first night that Bob picked me up at Norman Manley Airport, December 1973, he drove around to a whole bunch of hotels, and I didn't stay in one of them. I slept on the beach right outside his house with my guitar and my suitcase. I slept in a lawn chair, and I was eaten alive by mosquitoes. That was my first night in Kingston. And then he realized that this wasn't really nice. And so after some days of that, I ended up in Hope Road. But there was no accommodations there. I had a half an inch cardboard cot. I slept on that for a year and a half.
Wow.
Before they released Natty Dread. So I got the beat down first. From the ground up, I saw Hope Road build, and I learned everything from the floor to the ceiling about what was going on in Hope Road. And I learned the hard way. It wasn't easy. I didn't come there and there was like accommodations. There was no house. There was no car. There was no money. He didn't have any money then. Wow. He was really getting He spent all his money on Catch a Fire and Burning. And when he got his deal for, I believe, Natty Dread, is when he bought Hope Road Studio. But there wasn't anything in there. So Chow, Sticko, and myself, a guy named Blackskin, Shanti, was all these brothers there that were disciples of the Wailers. And I was part of this crew. We had bananas, and peanuts, and Fosca oats, and we would make porridge and we would make health drinks, and that kept me alive. There was no money. And then I met Earl Chinna Smith, who took me into the studio. He said, man, I like your style. And he says, man, what are you doing? I says, man, I'm starving. I don't have any money and there's no work, because they were waiting to distribute the Natty Dread album, get Natty Dread out in the market, get the promo going for it. So I had to wait in Jamaica until it happened. And it took like a year and some. So all that time I was kind of like busking, homeless, sleeping on the floor of Hope Road. And then they released Natty Dread, and there were several hit songs. And like I said, Earl Chinna Smith, God bless you, Earl. I love you, man. He got me into the studio, and I was able to fend for myself, buy food, get some basic clothing and stuff. So I lived like the Jamaicans lived. There was poverty around Bob Marley and the Wailers in Kingston 12 at this time. There wasn't a lot. Bob worked really hard. Peter and Bunny worked really hard to get a recording contract where they could get their just deserves, their royalties, their merchandise. And Chris was a very instrumental person with Peter, Bob, and Bunny, and especially Bob, at getting the music to the people, to the rest of the world. But what he didn't do was correctly divide the finances, where the artist was thought of after the CEOs, the record execs, and the distributors for Island. So we were always working so hard to get our royalties from Island Records. There was never statements. It was really complicated from the beginning. But then after No Woman, No Cry became a #1, Belly Full was a #1, Lively Up Yourself was a #1. Things got immensely better. But I never received my just deserves from my humble beginnings, coming from Miss Booker's house until now. And I'm thankful that I was able to live like the Jamaicans lived. They taught me a lot. I owe a lot to Jamaica. I'm going to give back as much as I can when I stabilize my own being now, because being with COVID and all these crazy things that are stopping us from bringing music and people together. Financially, it's very difficult for all musicians to make a living when all of a sudden it can all go to a red light where we're just parked and there's no elevation. We're not going anywhere. So luckily enough, we're able to come and play in Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, and Germany, and all of South America and America. I'm thankful for what Jamaica has done to me and my affiliation with the Wailers, because a lot of people think that, I came to Jamaica to separate Peter, Bob, and Bunny and just play with Bob. I came to Jamaica to play with anybody. I'm a musician. And I was hoping Bob would get back together with Peter and Bunny, because could you imagine? Bob just has Natty Dread, the #1 album in the world at one time. And you have Peter and Bunny. Bunny had Blackheart Man, and Peter had Legalize It, and all the records that they had done, Catch a Fire Burning. What a catalog to do. You got Peter, Bob, and Bunny, 3 of the most amazing songwriters from Jamaica, where I'm a musician that's going to play all their music That's what I thought. But it ended up just working with Bob, and then later on leaving the band and working with Peter. Because as the success comes, a lot of other baggage comes along as well. And I'm not knocking anybody. That went for Peter and Bunny, because they thought that, oh, this American guy, he's sent from Chris Blackwell, he's a spy. You know, they bruised me with marijuana joints. They stepped on my shoes. They gave me the worst amplifier. They had a really bad attitude for me. But when they saw my intentions, I respected them. I just took it like a soldier. I said, you know what? Eventually, Peter and Bunny will understand that I'm here to support reggae music, not any individual. It was all about, you know, I felt like, wow, I have, not as an American, just as a musician, I have the opportunity to help this music get to the right place. And I'll do whatever I can, because that's what my job is to do. That's my loyalty to the music. And these artists in Jamaica, I play with a lot of people. I did all the Sunsplash tours. I played with Gregor Isaacs, Dennis Brown, Oswald, Inner Circle, you know, I did a lot of things over the years. And I'm really grateful that my humble beginnings got me to where I am today. And I understand what it really takes to keep, you know, going, keep it going. Like Bob said before his journey, he says, a lot has happened to him and a lot is going to happen to you after I reach my destination. But do your best to keep the synergy with everybody in the band. Don't jump into, you know, don't jump out of the situation you're in. Stay here, honor the music that we made together, and write your own songs. And that's what he instilled in me, for me to call my incarnation of the OG Wailers. I'm one of the original members. Bob, I played with Peter and Bunny at the arena in Kingston, and I rehearsed with them for weeks, months. So I feel like inside myself, I had something to do with Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailers music. And it was really that I gave them 100% of what I have. And so the little that I did get financially from it, I spiritually got an overabundance of strength and knowledge on how to continue represent Bob Marley and the Wailers music, my music, and the music that the Wailers created, and do it really respectfully. I don't want to be a tribute to Bob or Bob Marley and the Wailers. I want to be able to honor the songs that we arranged for Bob and he wrote, and also play my original songs so I can be recognized as a musician that writes his own song, sings his own material, along with the guys that are working with the OG Wailers today with me.
Well, on that note, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing, continuing on with the music of Bob and bringing your own stuff as well. I can't wait to see you in Perth, mate. Thanks so much for your time.
The best place to contact me would be the original Wailers website.
Okay, cool. What I'll do is, if you're listening to this on the radio, this original Wailers website, on the podcast, I will put a link to that website in the description of the podcast. So if you want to connect with Al and the new music, look at the tour dates or buy tickets, anything else, the link will be in the description to this podcast. Al, thanks again so much, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to talk to you today, and all the best and good luck with the tour and safe travels, mate.
Come and say hello. We'll have a drink, have a jar, and just.
I would absolutely.
I'll bring some vinyl for you too.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, you can see I'm a collector. Yeah. That is the actual wall of my office in the background there. Yeah.
I got one for you.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks a lot, Al. Really appreciate it, mate. All the best, mate. See you later. That was a Mixtape podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to jump up to the top of the page and smash that follow button, and you'll be notified every time there's a new episode. Or follow me on Instagram at the Mixtape Perth. Until the next time.